They unanimously agreed that she was the most stunning lady on earth. But Hedy Lamarr was practically blind when she died alone. Even her own son was vying for a share of her estate as she lost her riches and had cosmetic surgery that damaged her looks. However, it's hardly the most outrageous aspect. She had evidence of a billion-dollar innovation stashed away in her little Florida house. One that powers the phone you're carrying with you at this second. Here is the crazy tale of how a Hollywood starlet lost it all. With the exception of her deepest, darkest secret, the actress Hedy Lamarr came into this world in Vienna, Austria on November 9, 1914. Emil Kiesler was her father. He worked his way up the banking ladder and eventually became the head of a major bank in Austria. Gertrude, her mother, was a gifted pianist from a wealthy Jewish family in Hungary. Gertrude committed to Christianity despite her Jewish heritage, and she brought Hedy up in a Christian home. This blending of identities impacted Hedy's sense of self, particularly in her latter years in Hollywood, even though she was never baptized. Vienna was a hub of creativity and innovation in the arts, music and sciences throughout that period. It was a meeting spot for brilliant people from all around the globe. In the midst of it all, Hedy spent her childhood. Her father aroused her interest in technology, while her mother fostered her passion for the arts. On their lengthy walks, he would often explain the inner workings of equipment. The inner workings of common home appliances, printing presses, and street vehicles all became interesting subjects of study. She took notes, probed for clarification, and brainstormed solutions. These little experiences would pave the way for something far greater in her life, though she couldn't have known it at the time. Even at a young age, Hedy's attractiveness was obvious. She joined a beauty pageant in Vienna in 1926 at the tender age of 12, and came out on top. This was more than a feat accomplished when I was a kid. It foretold her future more than anything else. She learned the importance of appearances from the attention she received, but she also recognized that they weren't everything. For hours on end, she would observe passers-by, mimic their movements, and analyze their facial expressions. A lifelong student, she went on to say that she was like a living copybook. She had already had her sights on a career in Hollywood by the time she was 16 years old. Sascha Film is Austria's biggest film company, but landing a position there wasn't simple. She got a job as a script girl without waiting for approval since she falsified her mother's signature. Even though it was a little job, she got to see the filming process firsthand. The process of making a movie was something she studied by seeing filmmakers and reading screenplays. Although she was just a teenager at the time, she was laying the groundwork for future events. She landed a little part in the 1930 romantic comedy Money on the Street when she was an extra at the studio. She had a small speaking role in Storm in a Water Glass the following year, yet another humorous piece. Max Reinhardt, a producer, saw her potential at that time, and put her in a piece at the theater in Der Josefstadt called The Weaker Sex. She left such an impression on him that he brought her to Berlin, where he believed more chances were in wait. Things, however, did not proceed according to plan after she arrived. She was never a part of Reinhardt's training or performances. Alexis Granovsky, a Russian theater producer, was her encounter instead. He cast her in The Trunks of Mr. Oev when he was just starting out in the film industry, with Peter Lorre and Walter Abel in a picture released in 1931. After that, Granovsky departed for Paris. Her time in Berlin paid off in 1932 when Karl Boss's comedy No Money Needed cast her as the protagonist. Her second part, though, was the game changer, even if that one afforded her more screen time. When Hedy Lamarr was just 18 years old, she became entangled in a controversy that would tarnish her reputation forever. Ecstasy, a film from the Czech Republic, featured her in 1933. Gustav Machady was the director. Using solely Lamarr's facial expressions, the video broke new ground as the first non-pornographic film to depict nudity and a simulated female orgasm. It followed a young woman as she fled her terrible marriage in search of love. Worldwide indignation was triggered by the then shocking footage of Lamarr running naked in a field and swimming. A global outcry ensued upon the film's debut. The United States Customs Service deemed it indecent and immoral, leading to its prohibition. It was denounced by Pope Pius XI. A number of nations declined to review it. Some states such as Nebraska and New York continued to prohibit it even after an amended version reached the United States in 1935. Even though Lamarr became renowned due to the issue, it also contributed to her being stereotyped as a sensual femme fatale when she eventually made it to Hollywood. It wasn't only her career that the picture altered, it had an unexpected impact on her private life as well. Friedrich Mandl, an Austrian armaments merchant, got completely enamored with ecstasy after seeing her. He was among the wealthiest Austrians at the age of 33, providing weaponry to European governments. Attempting to purchase and destroy every extant copy of the picture, he supposedly spent $280,000, more than $6 million today, in an effort to erase Lamarr's involvement. Despite his failure, he persisted in seeking additional means of controlling her. It was on August 10, 1933, when Lamarr wed Mandl, at the tender age of 18. His riches and influence drew her in at first, but she quickly came to terms with the fact that she had made a fatal error. Mandl was rude, and treated her like property, in addition to being overbearing. Because he would not allow her to continue playing, he imprisoned her in their opulent house, Schloss Schwarzenau. He had even dictated the details of her wedding. Despite her Jewish origins, he coerced her into becoming a Catholic. Mandl's fixation with power extended beyond his marital status. He was personally acquainted with Hitler and Benito Mussolini, two prominent fascist figures. Despite the outrage of Lamarr's Jewish parents, she felt she had no choice in the matter. In retrospect, she said she felt trapped, like a doll in a cage on show but never truly free. But even in her solitude, she was gaining knowledge. Even though Lamarr was frequently the target of military officials and weapons specialists' interest, Mandl frequently entertained them at their house. They spoke about cutting-edge electronics and military strategy, and she listened intently. Her education in engineering, which would go on to alter the course of history, was based on her keen intellect rather than any prior instruction. She realized she had to go away by 1937. Her resolve is evident in all accounts, while the specifics of her scheme differ from one source to another. She went into her memoirs and said that she had snuck out of the home by a servant's entrance after doping the maid with sleeping pills and dressing in her uniform. She drove to the train station, took keys from Mandl's employees, and ran away to Paris. She may have manipulated Mandl into allowing her wear her priceless jewels to the celebration, according to another account. She took advantage of the situation and ran away, taking a train to Paris with enough money to start anew. Her escape in any case was risky. If Mandl had apprehended her, she might never have been seen again. He possessed great power, however, she succeeded. She went to London from Paris. When Hedy Lamarr came to London in 1937, she had a plan. She seized the opportunity when she heard that Louis B. Mayer, chairman of MGM Studios, was in Europe seeking new talent. She was offended though when Mayer offered her a weekly contract for $125. Her performance in Ecstasy, 1933, had made her the buzz of Europe only a short time before. A Czech film whose bare scenes stunned moviegoers. Mayer became wary after becoming renowned due to the affair. She had promise, but he was scared to take a chance on her. Even though Lamarr turned down the offer, she was determined not to let the chance pass her by. On the contrary, she devised an audacious strategy. She had herself booked into the very ocean ship that Mayer was using to return to America. She was very careful to remain in his sphere of influence throughout the Normandy cruise. She mesmerized everyone in her path with her stunning good looks and magnetic personality. When they got to New York, she had already made a U-turn. Mayer accepted a revised contract that was 4 times his first offer, amounting to $500 per week. Mayer still had a stipulation. She had to put her troubled past in the past if she ever wanted to be a famous Hollywood actress. He proposed the name Hedy Lamarr as an alternative. In doing so, she hoped to establish a new persona and separate herself from the controversies surrounding Ecstasy. The sad beauty of the silent cinema actress Barbara Lamarr served as inspiration for the surname. Lamarr was prepared to face Hollywood with her new identity and contract. In 1938, she made her debut in Algiers, adaptation of the French film Pepe le Moko, set in the United States. Her character Charles Boyer is captivated by the enigmatic Gabi, who she played. With a smart marketing campaign, MGM hyped up her entrance by casting her as an obscure Austrian actress. Many others allegedly gasped when they saw her on TV for the very first time. She was criticized for her appearance, rather than her acting skills. "You don't really notice if she can act," according to one assessment. "She's very gorgeous." As a result of the film's popularity, Lamarr shot to fame. Her 1940 film Boomtown chronicles the friendships, rivalries and ambitions of oil business heavyweights Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, and Claudette Colbert. The film's director Jack Conway took his cue from a short tale by James Edward Grant, titled A Lady Comes to Burke Burnett. A refined socialite named Karen Van Meer, portrayed by Lamarr, becomes entangled in the lives of two oil wildcatters. In the background, Gable and Tracy were quite tense with each other. Because Tracy was unhappy about being second-billed, their old feuds flared up again. Still, the picture was a financial smash. At the box office it produced $5 million, quite a bit for that period. Although Lamarr was overshadowed by Gable and Tracy, she added sophistication and wit to the picture. Even with such an A-list ensemble, her roles stood out and gave the plot more dimension. The next year, in 1941's Come Live With Me, she co-starred with Jimmy Stewart in a romantic comedy, marking a departure from her previous dramatic work. The film, which was directed by Clarence Brown and starred Lamarr as Viennese immigrant Bill Smith, follows Smith as she finds an unexpected ally in Stewart's Johnny Jones, a struggling writer, in her quest to marry an American citizen and evade deportation during World War II. A hastily arranged marriage blossoms into something more serious over time. Lamarr seldom got the chance to display her humorous side, but the film gave her the opportunity. The plot felt more authentic thanks to her relationship with Stewart, and critics lauded her for skillfully blending sensitivity and comedy. Even though the film bombed at the box office, it demonstrated that she could manage comedic parts as well as dramatic ones. In the same year, she co-starred alongside Lana Turner and Judy Garland in the glitzy musical drama Ziegfeld Girl, 1941. Joan Crawford and other A-listers were initially in the cast, but Lamarr, Garland and Turner were quickly climbing the Hollywood ladder by that point. As they all became Ziegfeld Follies showgirls, the film followed three ladies, whose paths to stardom and ambition were markedly different. Sandra Coulter, portrayed by Lamarr, is an immigrant from Europe who supports her husband's music career as a violinist by joining the Follies. Subtle and elegant was her performance, contrasting with Turner's more tragic portrayal of Sheila Regan, a woman entangled in the ebb and flow of celebrity. Another financially successful picture, Ziegfeld Girl, demonstrated Lamarr's versatility and showcased a developing trend in her career. She was more often than not cast in roles that played to her attractiveness than those that tested her acting chops in Hollywood. Cecil B. DeMille's biblical epic Samson and Delilah, which she starred in by 1949, was the pinnacle of her career. She portrayed Delilah, the lady who tempts Samson, but ultimately betrays him by showing him his uncut hair, the source of his power. Samson the Nazarite, a book by Vladimir Jabotinsky, was an additional source of inspiration for the cinematic adaptation of the Book of Judges. It wasn't until DeMille saw Lamarr in 1946's The Strange Woman that he decided she was the ideal actress for the part. He went on to say that she was as graceful as a gazelle, and that she never made a mistake. The play Samson and Delilah was a huge hit. When it was opened in theaters in December of 1949, it made $9 million. It meant it made more money than any other picture in 1950. Best Costume Design and Best Art Direction were also Oscar winners. Many people thought Lamarr did a great job. She gave nuance and intellect to a part that was otherwise flat. Her performance was more than simply pretty on screen, according to DeMille himself. She became one of Hollywood's biggest stars after this picture. However, this event also signaled the start of her slow departure from the business. Hollywood viewed her as the epitome of an exotic seductress, due to her beauty, which became a burden as well as a blessing. She played a wanted but untouchable exotic woman in films such as White Cargo, 1942, and Lady of the Tropics, 1939. Her part was nonetheless minor in Boomtown, 1940, even though she co-starred with Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable. Trapped, Lamarr felt, "Glamour may be found in any female," she once stated. "Just remain still and appear foolish." It was a scathing critique of her treatment by Hollywood. It was nearly unprecedented for an actress to launch her own production business in 1946, but she was hell-bent on taking charge. It wasn't easy to break free from Hollywood's expectations though. Despite her achievements, the industry continued to view her in the same light. Hedy Lamarr was famous for more than only her work in Hollywood. Behind her glitz was a bright intellect that influenced technological advancements. She collaborated with composer George Antheil to develop a method that may counter enemy radio signal jamming during WWE. Is it their creation? The technology known as frequency hopping spread spectrum was created in 1941 and granted a patent in 1942. Despite the U.S. Navy's initial disinterest, the technology laid the groundwork for GPS, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The marriage of Lamarr to Friedrich Mandl, an Austrian armaments maker, gave her a grasp of military technology. He had personal connections to European despots like Hitler and Mussolini, and was one of the wealthiest persons in Austria. He was Lamarr's conduit to top-secret military strategy meetings and cutting-edge weaponry. Unfortunately, her restrictive marriage led her to seek refuge in London before she could flee to Hollywood, where she rose to stardom. Despite her accomplished acting career, she yearned to make a difference during the war. She crossed paths with experimental music composer George Antheil, and the two began talking about methods to aid the Allies. Antheil was familiar with synchronized player pianos, which allowed for the simultaneous control of several instruments through the use of rolls of punched paper. Instead of relying on a single frequency, which could be readily jammed, Lamarr discovered that a comparable method might be utilized to provide a safe radio signal for guiding torpedoes. The signal would synchronize the quick switching of several frequencies. Enemy forces would find it extremely difficult to intervene because of this. The 88 piano keys served as inspiration for their system's architecture, which made use of 88 distinct frequencies. By precisely synchronizing their frequency hops, the transmitter and receiver would create an almost impenetrable signal. On August 11, 1942, they were granted U.S. patent number 2,292,387 for what they dubbed a covert communication system. However, the U.S. Navy disregarded it because to its perceived complexity, despite its promise. The military eventually abandoned Lamarr's concept in favor of alternative torpedo guiding systems. The military didn't start employing frequency hopping for secure communications until the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. She never made a dime from Lamarr's patent as it had already expired by that point. However, her efforts were not ignored indefinitely. Scientists and engineers finally understood the value of frequency hopping spread spectrum after all these years, upon which contemporary wireless communication relies. The Electronic Frontier Foundation Pioneer Award was bestowed upon Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil in 1997 in recognition of their technological accomplishments. With Lamarr's passing in 2014, the National Inventors Hall of Fame posthumously honored him. Everyday technologies that link the globe today employ her invention. A movie star was the least she could be called. The future was shaped in part by her vision. The romantic life of Hedy Lamarr was just as exciting as her career in Hollywood. Each of her 6 marriages had its own unique dynamics, ranging from passionate love to sour betrayal. There were beautiful couplings and tumultuous ones, and some left emotional scars. The subject of her first spouse has previously been covered. The Hollywood producer and screenwriter, Jean Marquis, was her second spouse. In 1939, at the height of her fame, they tied the knot. For a little while, Marquis and her charismatic, well-connected beau appeared like the ideal Hollywood pair. Hedgerow Farm was their magnificent Beverly Hills mansion, where they lived in the lap of luxury. The public thought that while they were married, they adopted a son named James. James found out decades later that John Loder, Lamarr's third husband, was truly his biological father. For years the reality remained buried, adding layers of complexity to an adoption tale that appeared straightforward. The connection between Lamarr and Marquis had deteriorated by 1941. It was too much for her profession, and Marquis wanted to do what he wanted to do. After only 2 years of marriage, they completed their divorce. In 1943, she married for the third time to English actor John Loder. Denise was born in 1945, and Anthony in 1947, the result of their 4-year marriage. In addition to formally adopting James, Loder gave him his last name. Their family appeared whole at first glance. James continued to separate himself from Lamarr, even after she passed away, and he even challenged her will. During her marriage, she achieved some of her most notable Hollywood accomplishments, but her private life was a complete opposite. Their partnership was tested by competing objectives and the demands of fame. The marriage had already come to an end by 1947. In 1951, Lamarr felt prepared to give it another go. Mr. Acapulco, a former musician and nightclub entrepreneur named Ted Stauffer, was her husband this time. Their romance was passionate and rapid. After a passionate encounter at his nightclub, they tied the knot in a judge's Santa Monica residence. However, there was mischief in the making behind all the hubbub. Stauffer was violent, according to Lamarr's court testimony. At the Beverly Hills Hotel, he once struck her so forcefully that she slammed into a wall. Even though he was known for his charisma, a different man would emerge when they weren't looking. Divorce was finalized in 1952, just over a year after the marriage began to crumble. Her sixth spouse, Lubbock, Howard Lee, stood out from the crowd. He had immense riches and influence as an oil billionaire from Texas. The opportunity to give Lamarr something she had never had before, having a steady income.
It seems like she had finally discovered a stable relationship when they were married in 1953. Money, however, was insufficient to resolve all issues. Even though their 7-year marriage was the longest of her life, it ended in a contentious court fight. Lee wed fellow Hollywood actress Jean Tierney not long after the divorce was completed in 1960. Another heartbreaking reminder that her love life was never uncomplicated was the drawn-out legal battle for alimony. Lamarr continued to have faith in marriage, even if her personal life had grown more subdued by 1963. This time she went with an unlikely choice: Louis J. Boys, her own divorce attorney. In the same year they tied the knot. Nonetheless, their romance was short-lived. Just 2 years after that, in 1965, they got a divorce. Her last marriage would be this one. Never again did she take her place at the altar after this. She remained single and largely lived alone for the remaining 35 years of her life. Bombshell. The Hedy Lamarr Story, a documentary released in 2017, shed fresh light on a lady who was known for much more than her Hollywood career. The film, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and was directed by Alexandra Dean, examined the dual talents of Lamarr, the most beautiful woman in the world at one point, and her inventive genius. Although she was well known for her on-screen roles, few were aware that she had contributed to the development of current wireless technology. Using previously unreleased recordings of Lamarr is one of the album's most eye-catching features. To the delight of her listeners, she uses her own words to articulate her thoughts and feelings. She describes how Hollywood praised her for looking over her shoulder, how the world was sluggish to recognize her as an inventor, and how her brilliance was frequently disregarded. The film brilliantly depicts a trailblazing lady. The narrative and complexity were lauded by critics, winning it several festival accolades and a 96% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Lamarr may have died in 2000, but her impact lives on. Ericsson helped fund the establishment of the Hedy Lamarr Chair for Women in Technology at Spain's University of Malaga in 2022. Workshops, coaching and contests like the Hilda Ericsson competition are among ways the program encourages women to pursue careers in STEM. Hedy Lamarr lived her latter decades in total solitude. She chose to live a reclusive life in a small 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom cottage in Castleberry, Florida, after a glittering career in Hollywood. She hardly ventured outdoors. She had been completely disoriented after undergoing a series of cosmetic procedures that had changed her appearance. She also became legally blind when she was in her 70s. She became so reliant on her phone for communication that she no longer noticed the world beyond her house. Long phone chats were her favorite, even more so than in-person meetings with her children. She tried to avoid the spotlight, but she ended up in the wrong places. She faced charges of stealing in 1966 in Los Angeles. Although the accusations were later dismissed, her reputation took a hit because of the incident. Second time around, in 1991, she was apprehended for stealing laxatives and eye drops from a Florida business, with a total value of $21.48. Claiming to have forgotten to pay, she vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Regardless, harm had been done. She further distanced herself from public life as a result of these episodes. Her glitz and stardom from her days in Hollywood were a thing of the past by the 1980s. Back in her day, she was among the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. In addition, she had co-invented a revolutionary technique that helped end the jamming of torpedo signals by enemy ships during WWI, a frequency-hopping system. Many years down the road, her innovation laid the groundwork for contemporary wireless networks like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Still, she remained in Florida, unnoticed and unrewarded, even while the world advanced thanks to her ideas. Hedy Lamarr passed away at the age of 85 on January 19, 2000. Heart disease, including atherosclerosis and persistent valvular heart failure, was officially listed as the cause of death. She died peacefully at her Castleberry home. To top it all off, her daughter Denise turned 55 on the same day she passed away. Her death was investigated as an unattended case due to her long history of living alone. However, it did not seem strange in any way. Lamarr had an estimated estate worth of about $3.3 million when she passed away. She was no longer worth even a fraction of that. She made what would be $300 million in today's dollars during her height in Hollywood. A lot of that money, though, went down the toilet due to a string of unhappy marriages, bad financial decisions, and court fights. Loves of Three Queens, which she produced in 1954, was one of her most financially disastrous works. In her optimistic view, the film would be commercially successful, therefore she self-funded it. But it turned into a financial catastrophe when she couldn't get distribution, and she lost a fortune. She attempted to defend her co-invented frequency hopping technique in the 1990s, when businesses started making money off of computerized copies of it. Those who were stealing her ideas were the targets of her legal actions. These actions allowed her to recoup part of her lost income, even if she never obtained the amount that was rightfully hers. Anthony Loder and Denise Loder DeLuca, her two biological children, were designated as the primary beneficiaries of her estate in her will. She left behind over $1 million, in addition to her possessions and artifacts from her careers as an inventor and actor. They had maintained a tight relationship with their mother, in contrast to their estranged half-brother James Loder. They did everything they could after she passed away to ensure that her legacy would go on, working on Calling Hedy Lamarr, a documentary that came out in 2004 even. But James Loder had nothing to show for it. While Hedy was married to screenwriter Gene Markey for a second time, she adopted him. However, James assumed John Loder's surname upon their marriage. When he was about 12 years old, their relationship began to crumble. He moved in with a different family following behavioral problems at boarding school. After that, they hardly exchanged words for the next half-century. James took Hedy's will to court once it came to light. She drafted it in November 1999, while she was not of sound mind, according to his argument, but the court affirmed its legitimacy. James ended up settling for just $50,000, which was far lower than his expectations. One of the most unpleasant aspects of Lamarr's personal life is the gulf that exists between her and her eldest son. Although James has claimed his mother abandoned him throughout his childhood, Anthony and Denise have insisted that he was never really a member of our family. Their rift's precise causes are unknown. People think it was just some old grudge from when he was a kid. Some people think it was on a more fundamental level,